Hi, I'm just going to do a quick run through of a feature I added recently to a web application written in Logtalk using SWI-Prolog and all of its HTTP libraries. So let's get that loaded up. And the feature in particular we're going to be looking at is this form. It's a technology acceptance form. I've got various questions which are static, but I wanted to know how people felt about the usefulness of interventions that I've sent during the user study. And I don't know what those interventions are. I don't know how many of them there are. Um, so I needed to generate those questions. We'll start with looking at how this form was generated, and then we'll look at the formal log system that I've been using, so I could automatically generate these forms and store the responses to them. So the handler that handles this get request to /tam is this one here. It's this tam object. I'm importing this handler, which gives me gives me the access to this super call to set up the handler for the root. This is, if you squint a bit, it looks a lot like the SWI-Prolog handler, and that's basically what it is. It's I've just got a library. I think it's on my GitHub, and I think it's available. It's ugly because I put it together really quickly, but I think that's quite beautiful to set up handlers for objects. This is only temporary because I wanted to show you this in a nice clean way and outside of the whole user study. But this is the method that's usually called with a get request. And you can see I'm calling it here too. So the header and the entry, they get together some terminalized HTML and they send it off to this bootstrap object to reply, because all of the CSS in this thing is bootstrap. And that's why I called it that. Okay, so that's the entry method that we're going to be calling, and this is mostly terminalized HTML in here with the exception of the variable, and you can see it's class card, and that's corresponding to everything inside this card, denoted by the border here. And there's this form HTML which generates this form here. So we'll look a little bit quickly as to how this is made. I get the current user because I want to pass it to the TAM form. So this object here, OsView, is basically a factory. I ask it for what kind of form I want, and then it gives me that form. I get the HTML from that form that promises a HTML1 method by a protocol, and then I abolish or delete the form. I'm creating a new form each time, so I can create it with the user information and request information in there, which is particularly handy for post requests when I want to get the values into the form. And then so I delete it. I'm not convinced that's the best way to do it. I think maybe a generic form and passing the data in might have been better, so there's not, creating and deleting forms as we go. There's nothing there. I just did it this way because I was copying Flask's WTF forms kind of pattern, way they handle things, and I was copying that because I was in a hurry. And if I can revisit this and do it in a better way then in the future, then I certainly intend to. So OsView is our factory and it's creating a form. I'm not going to look at OsView because it just creates a form, but we'll have a look at the TAM form itself. So here it is. It's extending a home form, which is indicating that not all the code that makes a TAM form work, like that HTML1 predicate, are we going to find in here. TAM form itself is something that I could give to someone who doesn't know Prolog, and if they're careful with their syntax, they'll be able to create new questions or delete questions within the form. So all that's in here are these question 4 predicates. The first argument is the question itself, and you can see this first one here corresponds to the first question. It's no surprise. Likert 7 is a type of question. It's actually an object, and it has its own HTML method to deliver its HTML. It's nice because you're not restricted to just the generic HTML um, form elements, like a text area or a check button or something like this. I got a Likert scale. It was a little complicated to make, but possible. Q1 is my ID. It's used not only for the HTML ID, but also when I get the post request, so I can get the value and associate it with question 1. And also I use library persistency with this at the moment for storing the responses to forms. So that's just a 4-argument term that's been stored, the form name, the user, the question number, and then their response, or the question ID, I should say. The labels are just options passed to the Likert scale in this case. There's more options you can pass to the questions, but that's all we needed for this. And then somewhere down here, there we go, is some code I've commented out. And this is what lets me generate forms depending on the events that are in the log. So between this one and this one should magically appear a couple of questions when I refresh. If I'd done a Logtalk make, they would. So let's remake this. There we go. Okay, drum roll. Way. So these two questions are generated from the log. How useful was the intervention? And this is an intervention that's taken place, and so is this one. They've taken place at least once in that log. So before I look at this code, let's take a look at the logs and how they are on the disk so this can make some sense. So this is the tail end of the log for the project that we're looking at. And you can see it's just a list of actions that have taken place. And as these come into the system, into the server, I'm using Logtalk's event handling system to pick up on it, and an object says, oh, I've seen this event has happened, an action has been done, and it writes it or appends it to this file on the disk. I do not want to change that log. So let's quit that without writing. Okay, so that log is handled by or read by this object called Bede. Bede was famously a historian in England. So if I ask Bede for the situation for project 10, it will give me this term like this. This is a situation calculus term. For all intents and purposes, it's equivalent to a list because this is something like do a one s0 is the end term like this, but that's really equivalent to the traditional list syntax, which normally we would just write as a one because we like things to look pretty, and Prolog can let us do that. So even though that looks kind of scary and complicated, it's not as bad as it looks because it's equivalent to a list. On this line here, you can see I've got sitcalc member. I said it was situation calculus, and sitcalc is the object that handles my situation calculus calls. So I can do intervene. I'm not bothered for what that is. I'll restrict it to 1. That's to do with levels. That's a lie. Okay. So I can ask it for members of that situation then, just like you would ask for a member of a list. The situation calculus libraries are all open source on GitHub. You can download them and play with them if you like. All Logtalk libraries. And I can get these interventions might happen more than once, so they do appear more than once. Because of that, I put it into a set of 3 predicate here. So I've got multiple interventions in a list. I'll just call it eyes. Once that predicate has completed, something like this. Now I need to turn that intervention I into a question. And that's what this line here is doing. It's just a standard format thing. And that generates the question itself. But I also need to generate the ID, and the ID is the tricky part. Because I'm going to concat Q onto some number M to get my ID, but I don't know what the number M is. So normally, if I just want to get one of my interventions out of the interventions, I would just use a member, right? And ABC, but that's not good enough because I need to know the A's, well, preferably 8, because I've got Q7, I want Q8 next, and B is 9, and I can't quite do that. But if you're reading my code above, you'll see I've used list nth0. Nth0 is included on a lot of Prolog distributions. And I've got an N, I've got my interventions and an intervention. And that gives me N is 0 and I is A. So I've got my counting. And it's just really nice with Prolog because this isn't how nth0 is usually used, right? Usually if you're doing an nth0 thing, you're telling it I want the 1th item out of some list. And what is it? And it will tell you there. So this is using Prolog backwards, or a different way. Same predicate, just a different orientation on it, I guess. So that's just when things work out like that, it's nice, isn't it? So then on the same line, I'm just adding 8 to it. I keep it on the same line because it's just such a tiny thing. Concat that on, and we have our generated question. We've from our log, we found the thing we were looking for. We've counted it, and we've got our ID, and our question's generated. So I hope you found that interesting. I will link to some of the libraries I'm using that I've made, that I've open sourced on GitHub, down in the description. Um, Otherwise, check out SWI-Prolog with Logtalk together for web developing. They work very nicely together. Yeah, bye for now.